Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands. There's a quality to certain silences that's deeply unsettling. It's not really the absence of sound, but more like a low, persistent hum that sits beneath the surface of the ordinary.
Yeah, like the unanswered ring of a phone,
Yeah.
maybe. Or
Yeah.
mail piling up.
Exactly. Or lights left on in an empty house. It's a silence that doesn't, announce itself with a bang. It creeps in.
And that kind of quiet, it often shows up right before or maybe lingers after something big happens, something life-altering. It's that stillness, that echoing emptiness. And it's this exact kind of silence that started to wrap around a family in Fallbrook, California. This was back in February 2010.
Fallbrook. You picture that sunny Southern California town, and then there's this one home right at the center of this quiet, creeping absence, the family living there they cease to exist, at least to the outside world. Joseph McStay, his wife Summer, and their two little boys, Gianni, who was 4, and Joseph Jr., only 3.
And what makes it so disturbing, right from the start, is the almost total lack of anything obvious. No signs of foul play, no forced entry at the house, no sign of a struggle. Instead, you find these eerily domestic scenes.
Yeah, untouched bank accounts, computers just left on, asleep, calls going straight to voicemail.
And even the dogs,
Mm.
Bear and Digger, they were just left behind, waiting for a family that, well, we now know was never coming back. It paints a picture not of violence, but just vanishing abruptly.
Exactly. So the first thoughts, the ones your mind jumps to, were simpler, right? Maybe a sudden trip down to Mexico, a spur-of-the-moment getaway.
Or maybe something sadder, like a personal crisis, a breakdown leading them to just leave their lives behind.
But none of those initial ideas, none of them really explain the growing unease, that nagging dread that settled in. It was like trying to fit a simple puzzle piece into this much bigger, darker space.
It really shows how we try to create narratives, doesn't it? Find reasons. When folks with a family just disappearing, the mind scrambles to fill that void. But sometimes those easy explanations, like they just left, well, they're misleading, especially before you know all the facts.
So what do you call a home that still feels warm? Echoes of life, daily routines, but the heartbeat's gone. What happens when a family just stops?
That's really the core of what we're digging into here. We're not just focusing on, the final moments, but the unraveling before and the long, haunting years of questions after.
Right. It's about those small erasures, the details that seemed insignificant at the time, that ordinary surface hiding a catastrophe underneath.
We often focus on the dramatic crime itself, but here it's the context, that everyday life texture that got shattered so completely.
So this isn't just recounting a crime, it's more a look at disappearance itself, how trust can be so fragile, and what silence eventually reveals. Painfully, usually. Okay, let's start unpacking this chilling sequence by looking at what that initial silence actually looked like, those specific details from the first days. Imagine walking into a home where life seems to have just paused.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how those tiny everyday details suddenly take on this huge weight when someone's missing. They stop being just things and become potential clues. Not necessarily clues to violence, but clues to a life just cut off.
Right. So days after February 4th, 2010, that's the last day anyone definitely heard from them, Joseph's brother, Michael, goes to the house. And what he found was, in a way, totally normal. But underneath that, something felt deeply wrong. Like on the living room table, a half-eaten bowl of popcorn, gone stale, unopened juice boxes nearby, a kid's drawing taped crookedly to the wall, a son, and a truck. You know the kind.
The TV paused mid-cartoon. It could be any family's Tuesday night.
Exactly. And that's the jarring part, the sheer normalcy compared to the fact that a whole family was just gone.
It creates this stillness, this silence born not of violence, but just absence, like a thread just snipped.
Michael had a key kept under the doormat. Just a small thing, but it says something about their routines, their trust. He called their names. Silence. Just the fridge humming, maybe a computer fan, sunlight streaming into an empty room.
And the house itself was tidy, almost too tidy. Dinner dishes were in the sink, neatly stacked, expired eggs on the counter.
And the dogs. Bear and Digger in the backyard. Alive, but clearly upset. Thirsty, confused. Like, where did everyone go?
That detail about the dogs, it's really telling, isn't it?
Yeah.
A huge sign that this wasn't planned. Any family, especially one like the McStays seemed to be, they'd arrange care for their pets if they were leaving for a while. Leaving them like that screams sudden or maybe even forced departure.
Exactly. It just didn't fit. People
Right.
don't walk away mid-sentence. Joseph had this successful business, decorative fountains, organized guy.
And Summer, a dedicated homeschooling mom, really involved with the boys. They just bought this house, putting down roots.
It looks like a family building a future, stable routines, which makes the sudden vanishing even more baffling, hard to grasp.
And the digital side, or really the lack of it, just made it weirder.
No recent bank activity, no cell phone pings, no credit card swipes, nothing after February 4th. That Thursday, it just becomes this hard stop.
Which in today's world,
Yeah.
that's a massive red flag. We leave digital breadcrumbs constantly for everything to just cease. That points to something serious happening.
But initially, the authorities, well, they were cautious. You can understand why, I suppose.
For Southern California, people do move, start over. Mexico's right there.
Yeah.
So a voluntary trip, it's plausible on the surface if there's no obvious crime scene.
The idea they just needed space or made a sudden family decision, it had to be considered.
Yeah, from a police standpoint, early on, without clear signs of a crime, no forced entry, no blood, no witnesses they have, to keep all options open, even if it seems unlikely to the family.
But then more details started coming out, and that planned trip theory began to fray. Their passports, still in the house, bank accounts, untouched, all the money still there.
No luggage packed. Summer's prescriptions, important ones, left on the counter.
And the boys' toys, the really treasured ones scattered in their rooms, none of that fits with packing for a trip. Joseph's computer was even still on. Last activity, February 4th.
Right. Those little details, together, they paint a picture of interruption, not abandonment. Things you just wouldn't leave behind if you were planning to go somewhere.
So then came this period of just intense uncertainty, anxiety ramping up for their family and friends. News reports started, local at first, then wider. Desperate pleas for information. A Facebook page went up, flyers were printed, search parties organized.
And the speculation starts, right? When there's no solid info, people fill the gap. Theories range from plausible to way out there, cults hiding domestic problems.
It's that human need to explain the unexplained, even if it's just guessing.
Exactly. But back in Fallbrook, the house just stood there, silent, lawn growing, room settling into this deeper quiet.
And that bowl of popcorn still on the table, stale now, like this weird little monument to something lost, unfinished, an everyday thing turned haunting.
It really captures the suddenness, the inexplicability, a snapshot of an ordinary evening, unknowingly their last one there.
This wasn't a splashy headline case at first. No sirens, no obvious suspects, no violence visible, just that deep, unsettling question in the empty rooms. Where do you go when you vanish without a struggle?
And it's that lack of struggle, that absence of obvious conflict in the home that makes it so unnerving. It suggests a vulnerability, even in the safest places.
Okay, let's pivot now to another small detail that became huge later on. The kitchen calendar.
Ah, yes, the calendar. So mundane, usually overlooked. But here it becomes this powerful symbol of time just stopping, a fixed point marking the last moment of normal.
It was one of those flip chart ones, apparently. Simple fruit pictures. And it was open to Thursday, February 4th, 2010, just another day, presumably. But Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the following days were never turned, hitting behind Thursday. Like time itself just stopped inside those walls.
It seems minor, right? But in an empty house, these small things get amplified. They take on this symbolic weight. That frozen date is just stark, a testament to a future that wouldn't happen there.
So that Thursday, February 4th, it became this dividing line. Investigators, reporters, anyone following the case saw it as the moment before everything changed. The last day anyone definitely heard from Joseph. The last answered call. The last verifiable moment of their ordinary lives.
And when you have a mystery this deep, piecing together that last known day is absolutely crucial. Every little thing, every call, every errand could hold a clue.
So what do we actually know about that day? Joseph had a work call, some project, sent some emails, a routine $200 bank transfer. His last log call was 8:208 p.m., business as usual. Everyone who spoke to him said he sounded totally normal, calm, engaged, no hint of trouble.
Right, it paints a picture of someone just going about their day, making plans, doing work. Nothing suggests he was about to disappear or was under threat.
Summer was home with the boys. She talked to her sister in the afternoon. Her sister said she sounded maybe a bit tired, but not alarmed or anything.
Later, Summer texted a friend to reschedule a kid's playdate. Again, totally mundane, normal mom stuff.
These brief interactions, they give us a glimpse. Tired maybe, but no signs of fear, anxiety, or crisis.
And then, silence. According to the records, just Nothing.
No more calls made or received, no more texts, no emails, no bank transactions, no digital footprint at all. It's like their online presence just flatlined after that Thursday.
In our world where everything's connected, that complete stop is really significant. We leave traces everywhere. For all of it to cease, it strongly suggests something external stopped them.
And this sudden lack of any trace, it was agony for Joseph's family. His dad, his brother Michael, they're frantic, trying to call, driving to the house, desperate for any sign. They pushed the police, pushed the media, even reached out to the FBI when the local response seemed slow.
You can only imagine the frustration, the anxiety, the helplessness. Being stuck between hope and the worst fears, especially if you feel like the official response isn't matching your urgency. It must be devastating.
But the official stance initially was still no proof of foul play, no obvious coercion, no blood, no struggle in the house, just a missing family. Concerning, yes, but not immediately a crime scene.
And law enforcement has procedures, right? They need concrete evidence before calling it a crime, so they had to consider all possibilities, even if a voluntary exit seemed unlikely to the family.
Then, weeks later, that piece of evidence surfaced. The grainy security footage. From the border, indistinct figures look like maybe a family of four walking towards Mexico.
Yeah, that footage, despite being so blurry and unclear, it seemed to offer a simple explanation. And for a while, it really fueled that voluntary departure theory, unfortunately.
Exactly. A narrative started to build. Maybe they did want to disappear. Maybe there were hidden problems. And the whispers started, often focusing on Summer. Some people described her as intense, maybe paranoid, controlling. Joseph, in contrast, was seen as maybe wanting an escape.
It's a common and often unfair pattern in these cases, isn't it? Picking apart the missing person's personality, especially women, trying to find a reason in them for their disappearance. It's often based on hearsay, speculation, and it can really distract from the facts.
So the calendar stayed stuck on Thursday the 4th, physically but also symbolically, representing that last known moment before the silence.
A powerful reminder of how quickly life can change. What seems like an ordinary day becomes, in hindsight, the last normal day they ever had together.
But as we know now, not all absence is voluntary. Not every quiet departure is a choice.
And that frozen calendar, it challenges that simple assumption. It hints that maybe external forces, things beyond their control, brought their lives to a halt.
Violently. Which brings us to just how unsettling a disappearance is when there are no clear signs of what happened.
Right, it's the lack of edges to the story. No obvious trigger, no clear motive right away, just vanishing. It defies easy answers.
The McStays were officially declared missing on February 15th, 2010, 11 days after that Thursday. 11 days of silence.
11 days of unanswered calls, uneaten food, growing dread, just waiting for information that never came. Imagine that anxiety.
That must have been unbearable, suspended between hope and fear.
Absolutely. And when police finally did enter the home officially, there wasn't apparently this immediate sense of urgency.
The house looked paused, like they'd just stepped out for a bit and would be right back.
Which again shows the initial confusion. The lack of obvious foul play can slow things down, lose critical time early on.
But they never came back. And their SUV, the Isuzu Trooper, was gone too. It turned up days later, abandoned in a parking lot in San Ysidro, very near the U.S.-Mexico border.
And finding the vehicle so close to the border, well, that just seemed to confirm the "they went to Mexico" theory for many people.
But the vehicle itself was weird. A ghost vehicle, it's been called.
No usable fingerprints inside. No signs of a struggle. No blood.
Yet inside were the kids' car seats, some clothes, a box of toys.
So many questions. If they drove there to cross into Mexico, why abandon the car? Why no passports, no cash taken, and why tell no one where they were going?
So that voluntary departure theory lingered, partly fueled by those stories about Summer, her anxieties, the name change, skepticism of institutions, painting a picture, maybe unfairly, of someone who might disappear.
You have to be so careful with those narratives, though. Having anxieties doesn't mean you'd abandon your whole life, your kids, with no word. It's a huge leap.
And that theory really started to crumble under scrutiny. Summer apparently had no desire to go to Mexico. In fact, some say she feared it. She was described as incredibly devoted to her boys, always in touch with her sister.
And Joseph was busy with work, just made a deposit, not the actions of someone about to flee.
Then back to the dogs. That detail kept coming up as crucial.
Leaving their pets like that, without food or water. Totally out of character for both of them. It screamed unplanned. Sudden.
Still, even with all these contradictions, there was no concrete proof of foul play right away, so the authorities stayed cautious, bound by procedure.
Which must have been agonizing for the family, watching time tick by, fearing the worst, while the official approach seemed measured.
And as days turned into weeks, then months, that initial hope started to fade, replaced by uncertainty. Friends may be pulled back, not knowing what to say or do. Media attention lessened. The early theories, even shaky ones, kind of hardened without new info.
And all the while, that calendar in the kitchen, still February 4th, 2010.
The passage of time without answers, it erodes hope, leaves you feeling helpless. And when the world seems to move on, the questions just echo louder in the silence.
So what do you do with a story that won't start? A mystery without a clear beginning. Time itself felt stolen from them, quietly erased.
Erased like chalk in the rain, as someone put it. And the terrifying thought started to creep in.
That in our connected world, whole families could just vanish, without a trace, and maybe no one would ever know why.
It's that lack of explanation that's so deeply disturbing. It challenges our sense of security, of order.
But even when physical evidence is scarce, the 21st century often leaves digital traces.
That's a key point. Our online lives leave trails, sometimes hidden, but they can be uncovered.
And in the McStay case, those digital shadows did eventually offer some faint glimmers.
Right. In the days right before they vanished, someone used the family computer to search for something specific.
What documents do children need to cross the border?
Exactly, which on the surface seems to fit that Mexico theory, doesn't it?
It certainly seems suggestive.
But the ambiguity is huge.
Yeah.
Who did the search? Joseph? Summer? Someone else entirely? The internet reflects, but not always who's holding the mirror, right?
A critical distinction. Without knowing who searched, you can't really draw firm conclusions about their intentions.
Then, February 8th, 4 days after they were last seen, their Isuzu trooper is spotted near the San Isidro border crossing. And we have that grainy surveillance footage appearing to show a family of 4 walking towards Mexico.
So you have the search, the car near the border, the blurry footage. You can see why law enforcement leaned towards voluntary departure initially. It seemed to line up.
But again, the massive inconsistencies. No known ties to Mexico, no packing, money untouched, no phone use after the 4th, and the passports left behind.
It really highlights the danger of relying on a few pieces of suggestive evidence when other facts scream the opposite.
Especially Summer's reported fear of Mexico, of crowds, instability, an impulsive trip across the border with her kids, no planning, seemed completely out of character.
Her known personality just didn't fit that narrative at all.
Then came another detail, quieter at first, not digital, but physical evidence. Small bits of gravel and mud found inside the trooper.
Okay.
Forensic analysis showed this gravel didn't match the terrain near San Isidro where the car was found. It suggested the car had been somewhere else, more inland.
Now that's interesting. That throws a wrench in the simple drove straight to the border idea. It implies the car might have gone somewhere else after they disappeared, before being left near the border, a different path.
The analysis couldn't pinpoint an exact location, but just its presence raised serious questions about the timeline, the car's movements.
Those small, overlooked details can be key. That gravel hinted at a stop, a detour not part of the original theory, suggesting something more complex, maybe sinister.
So we're left with these incomplete digital fragments, fleeting images. Even in a world full of cameras and data, a family could vanish, leaving clues that didn't add up.
It shows the limits of digital evidence alone. You need the full picture, physical and digital, analyzed together.
The big questions still hung there. Who would want to harm them, and why did no one see it coming? The digital shadows hinted, but didn't show the whole terrifying picture.
And tragically, as we found out later, those shadows definitely didn't reveal the darkness lurking much, much closer within their trusted circle.
The McStay house, right after they disappeared, it became this focal point. A physical space loaded with unsettling meaning.
Yeah, it transformed, didn't it? From a home into a question mark, drawing people and family, police, reporters, volunteers, all looking for answers.
Joseph's brother Michael was the first in, driven by fear. But then over the following weeks, others entered too. Sheriff's deputies, reporters, volunteers. And the doors were often unlocked, apparently. Not carelessly, maybe, but almost out of helplessness. Like, no lock could fix whatever happened.
That detail, the unlocked doors, it speaks to the confusion, the lack of a clear story early on, Nobody knew what they were looking for or how to even approach the emptiness.
But each entry disturbed that initial stillness, potentially clouding subtle clues. And without hard facts, speculation rushed in. Neighbors, family, online forums, everyone had a theory. Rumors about Summer started circulating again. Restlessness, controlling, the name change, wary of institutions, anxieties.
And you have to be so careful with those secondhand accounts, especially after someone's gone missing. Narratives get shaped, maybe unfairly.
Joseph, in contrast, was usually painted as steady, kind, maybe overworked. And his partnership with Charles Chase, Merritt started getting more attention.
Merritt. He becomes a really significant figure here. Older, maybe charismatic on the surface, but described as rough around the edges. A business associate. The fountain business was growing, and Joseph seemed to rely on him.
Merritt later claimed Summer disliked him, interfered in the business, was controlling. But Summer wasn't there to confirm or deny any of that.
Exactly. Those posthumous claims are impossible to verify, potentially self-serving. What we do know is Joseph was the connection between Summer and Merritt, and the dynamic between those three, it seems likely something fractured there.
But despite all the focus on the house, the people, the mystery remained. Still no confirmed sightings after Feb 4th, no pings, no withdrawals, no messages.
That continued. Absolute silence from them just reinforces how sudden and total their disappearance was.
And the house itself, examined multiple times, still offered no proof of violence, just those weird details. The popcorn, the half-packed diaper bag, the empty dog bowls.
Yeah, those details again. Pointing away from a planned exit towards an abrupt interruption, making the whole thing feel stranger, more sinister.
So the theories kept swirling. Wild ones. Sightings in Mexico, Joseph fleeing debt, witness protection, even cults.
When there's a vacuum of information, imagination fills it, often with improbable scenarios.
But with so many people in and out of the house, any chance of finding subtle clues likely diminished. The scene was handled disturbed.
The repeated entries, even with good intentions, might have compromised the scene's integrity.
It would take years, as our source notes, and a grim discovery out in the desert for the real story to start emerging. The house waited, not just for an answer, but for the right question.
And that right question, tragically, would only come with finding their bodies far from home.
That grim discovery was November 11th, 2013, almost 3 years after they vanished.
A devastating turning point, transforming it from a missing persons case into a homicide investigation. No turning back from that.
Out near Victorville, California, in the scrublands, a guy on a dirt bike saw something. Bones. A partial skull. Bits of faded fabric, like kids' pajamas.
Finding human remains in such a remote place, it immediately triggers the worst fears, starts a whole new grim phase.
Well, a wider search then uncovered 2 shallow graves. Inside, the remains of Joseph, Summer, Gianni, and little Joseph Jr.
The confirmation, ending years of uncertainty, speculation, fading hope, just devastating news.
And the cause of death for all 4 was horrifying. Blunt force trauma to the skull. The injury suggested a brutal, personal, violent attack.
That finding ruled out any possibility of accident or voluntary disappearance. It was murder. Deliberate, merciless.
They hadn't vanished. They'd been murdered. Buried in the Mojave Desert, 95 miles from home, a place with no known connection to them.
Why Victorville? That immediately becomes a chilling question. Who knew that area? Who had a connection there?
This discovery was huge. It reframed everything. Not a mystery of disappearance, but a quadruple homicide demanding answers.
Yeah, the whole investigation refocuses instantly. Who did this and why?
And these new questions arose. Why this spot? Who knew where to bury them?
Choosing such a remote site suggests the killer knew the area, or at least wanted somewhere they thought the bodies would never be found.
The graves themselves were shallow, rushed, bodies seemingly just dumped. No care, no ritual, suggesting fear, urgency, maybe?
The rushed burial points to wanting quick concealment, maybe panic, maybe fear of being caught, or maybe just a chilling indifference.
But even in that hasty burial, the dry desert preserved tiny clues. DNA traces, cloth fibers, duct tape remnants, and crucially, a rusted sledgehammer found nearby.
The desert environment can be surprisingly good for preserving evidence. Those small fragments become vital.
And that sledgehammer, it became a critical link. It was identified as a tool Joseph McStay used in his fountain business.
Joseph's own tool, found at the gravesite, that's pivotal. It immediately shifts focus to people who had access to his tools, knew his schedule, and might have a motive to want him gone.
Right. It narrows the field dramatically, points towards someone inside his circle, someone familiar.
It tragically suggests the answer was probably there all along. Maybe missed, maybe misinterpreted, waiting in plain sight,
The desert silence, after 3 years, had finally spoken, and the truth was far more brutal than anyone imagined.
And its message was one of shocking violence, betrayal from within, a darkness about to come into the light.
Thinking about those shallow graves, there's such a cruelty to them, isn't there? Denying rest, just leaving an outline in the dirt.
It's the ultimate disrespect for life, for death,
Yeah.
treating people like objects to be disposed of.
The details from the exhumation were just heartbreaking. Joseph's remains first, then Summers, then the boys, Gianni and Joseph Jr., found tangled together, wrapped in bedding.
Oh, the image of those two little brothers together.
Yeah.
It just underscores the senseless loss of innocent life, the human cost.
Forensics showed the brutality. All four had fractured skulls, consistent with the sledgehammer found nearby. Summer had multiple blows. It pointed to personal rage, not random violence.
The severity, especially the multiple blows to Summer, suggests intense personal anger, a deliberate intent to inflict brutal trauma.
And the hasty burial, minimal effort to hide them. It suggested the killer was close, maybe panicked, or maybe just didn't care enough to be careful.
Could be lack of foresight, or maybe they thought they'd gotten away with it, especially with the initial misdirection towards Mexico.
And for 3 years, while the world searched and speculated, the person responsible lived free, unsuspected by many.
That long passage of time, the killer at large, while the family grieved in uncertainty, it just adds another layer of tragedy. Delayed justice is agonizing.
Then the investigation zeroed in on Charles Chase Merritt, last known person to see Joseph alive, business associate, friend, supposedly.
His closeness to Joseph, his public statements of grief, it put him outside suspicion for many initially.
He'd even expressed devastation publicly and subtly reinforced some of those negative narratives about Summer, maybe deflecting.
That public performance of grief, echoing speculation. Looking back, it seems like calculated manipulation, deflecting suspicion, aligning himself with the wrong narrative.
But then came the financial evidence. Damning. 4 forged checks, over $20,000 total, from Joseph's business account to Merritt, right after the family disappeared.
And Merritt cashed them quickly, then went gambling at a casino.
That financial trail paints a very different picture. Self-serving, calculated, prioritizing his own gain right after his friend vanished.
Investigators dug deeper into Merritt. His statements had inconsistencies. Cell tower data put him near the Victorville gravesite around the time of the murders.
So you have the motive money, the forensic link cell data, and the lies in his story. It started building a strong case. The motive seemed to crystallize financial desperation. Merritt owed Joseph money. He likely feared being cut out of the business, maybe because of his debts, maybe because Summer didn't trust him.
Losing that income stream from Joseph's business?
Yeah.
That's a clear financial motive. Wanting Joseph and anyone who threatened that income, gone.
And Summer, who disliked and distrusted Merritt, she was probably seen as an obstacle to his access to Joseph's money and business.
Her disapproval likely posed a direct threat to Merritt's finances and his relationship with Joseph.
The grim theory that emerged was brutal. Murder the entire family. A total, permanent solution to Merritt's problems.
It's almost incomprehensible callousness. Killing not just Joseph, but his wife and little children too. Shows the depth of the betrayal, the depravity.
And that initial focus on the border crossing theory, it gave Merritt breathing room, time he shouldn't have had.
Right, that misdirection allowed him to maintain a facade of innocence, avoid intense scrutiny early on.
Chase Merritt was arrested in November 2014, almost a year after the bodies were found, charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. He maintained his innocence throughout.
His arrest was a huge step towards justice, finally. But the legal battle ahead would be long and draining for everyone.
But the McStays had returned, tragically. Not alive, but as evidence. Their story no longer merits to control.
The discovery, the investigation. It finally gave voice to their fate. A voice that couldn't be silenced by lies anymore.
You know, Chase Merritt, he didn't necessarily look like a monster. People called him personable, he made jokes, built fountains, called Joseph his friend.
It's unsettling, isn't it? How danger can come from inside trusted circles, hidden behind familiarity, even affection.
But his past showed instability, petty crime, charm maybe, but also volatility, convictions for burglary, theft.
That history suggests a pattern, maybe? Opportunism, willingness to harm others for his own gain.
Joseph, on the other hand, seemed trusting, methodical in business, valued loyalty. He gave Merritt a chance, a lot of trust, despite the past.
And that trusting nature, admirable in many ways, tragically became a vulnerability when dealing with someone like Merritt.
Looking back, Merritt's interviews after the disappearance, the claims of devastation, the subtle blaming of Summer, it all feels chilling now.
Yeah.
Sinister.
Those public statements seem less like grief and more like calculated deception, trying to control the narrative, shift suspicion.
And then the hard evidence. The forged checks, cashing them immediately, the surveillance footage of him gambling Joseph's money while the family was still missing.
Those actions speak louder than any words. They
Yeah.
show his real motives, his shocking lack of remorse right after it happened.
Investigators built the case meticulously. Digital trails, cell tower data linking him to the gravesite, the hammer, his weak alibi, the lies, and that clear motive. Greed.
It was a combination of forensic evidence, digital records, and Merritt's own contradictions
Hmm.
that painted the undeniable picture of guilt.
And the motive was just so base, petty, financial gain, fear of losing income because of his debts and Summer's disapproval. The destructiveness of it is staggering.
A selfish, short-sighted motive leading to unimaginable brutality against an entire family.
The murder seemed clumsy, reactionary maybe, not perfectly planned, but effective for a long time because the investigation initially went down the wrong path.
That misdirection bought him crucial time, a false sense of security.
Merritt was arrested November 5th, 2014, pleaded not guilty, insisted he was innocent despite the mountain of evidence.
His continued denial, even facing all that evidence, suggests profound delusion or just a desperate final attempt to evade accountability.
In the end, Joseph's trust in Merritt became his fatal vulnerability, a betrayal only fully understood in hindsight. Devastatingly.
A heartbreaking reminder that betrayal can come from those closest to us, that sometimes the familiar faces hide the darkest intentions.
Justice arrived slowly, agonizingly slow. Chase Merritt's trial didn't start until 2019, nearly a decade after the McStays disappeared.
Those years between the crime and the trial, so much unresolved grief, uncertainty, searching for answers for the family left behind.
You think about those lost years. For Gianni and Joseph Jr., birthdays, holidays, just growing up, the lives they never got to live, it's just heartbreaking.
The potential extinguished. It's an immeasurable tragedy.
Merritt's trial was complex, lots of delays. He even represented himself for part of it.
His self-representation probably added to the complexity and length, and maybe didn't help his defense against the evidence.
The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Forged checks, cell data, the hammer, timelines, lies, the motive of greed, showing how petty and destructive it all was.
It was that web of connected evidence, forensic, digital, financial testimonial, that ultimately proved convincing.
Merritt's defense, from reports, seemed weak. Blaming others, conspiracy theories, but no solid alibi, no way to counter the prosecution's evidence.
Attempts to deflect blame without factual support rarely persuade a jury.
Then finally, June 2019, the verdict. Guilty, on all 4 counts of first-degree murder. The jury recommended the death penalty.
A long-awaited legal closure to a case that had haunted so many for so long.
But there was no celebration, right? No sense of victory, just this heavy, bitter relief. Finally, an answer, however awful.
Justice brings accountability, but it can never undo the loss. That's the tragic reality.
The courtroom went silent when the verdict was read. Joseph's family wept quietly. Summer's relatives held hands. Merritt showed no emotion, no remorse.
His lack of reaction at that moment speaks volumes. No acknowledgement, no responsibility for the lives he destroyed.
And outside, the world kept moving. The house in Fallbrook had been sold. The desert wind swept over the gravesite. The question was answered finally. But not with peace, just truth.
The world moves on, but the void left by the McStays is permanent for those who love them and for those who remember their story.
In stories like this, there isn't really peace, just quiet remembering. A pause, turning a painful page. And the ache of those 4 names. Joseph, Summer, Gianni, Joseph Jr. A family gone, never forgotten.
Their memory is a poignant reminder of life's fragility, the devastating impact of betrayal, a chilling testament to human darkness.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, you feel how some stories just settle in you, don't they? They don't really go away, like dust in sunlight, just always there.
The McStay story resonates because of that senseless loss, the innocence destroyed, and the disturbing betrayal at its heart.
They're not missing anymore, not a complete mystery. The story's been told, in court, in the news. But that absence, you still feel it. It's palpable.
Right. Even with answers, the void they left is undeniable, a permanent reminder of the finality of death, the irreplaceability of family.
You can still see the traces, can't you? The house where they lived, that misleading border footage, the unsettling questions from how ordinary their last days seem.
Those fragments remain as haunting reminders of the vibrant lives cut short.
It's the lack of warning. No final message, no chance for goodbye. Just a normal Thursday. That's what stays so deeply unsettling.
The suddenness, the lack of premonition, it highlights our own vulnerability, how life can change in an instant.
And it comes back to that profoundly unsettling idea. You can live a good life, build something, love deeply, and still be vulnerable to fatal betrayal from someone you trusted.
It challenges our sense of safety, forces us to confront that evil can hide in plain sight among familiar faces.
Danger doesn't always announce itself. As this story chillingly shows, sometimes it creeps in silently wearing a mask of friendship.
Indeed. The greatest threats can be the ones we least expect from people we think we know best.
So the legal case is closed. But the emotional story, the impact, isn't over. Not for those connected, not for those who followed it.
The emotional scars, the grief from a crime like this, they can last a lifetime, far beyond legal conclusions.
And that silence we started with, it feels different now, louder somehow, weighted with loss, echoing with questions that maybe never fully go away.
It's a silence heavy with unimaginable loss now, a testament to a profound and senseless tragedy.
So we leave you with this thought, maybe uncomfortable. Some truths arrive too late for comfort, some griefs are too deep for words, and some absences, like the McStays, become these quiet, heartbreaking reminders of how fragile life is, how suddenly it can all be shattered.